Welcome to After the Letter, our companion conversation following this week's reading of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. One of us has spent time preparing and narrating the letter, while the other is hearing it with fresh ears. Together we reflect on what surprised us, what challenged us, and why these letters can still prompt questions about our own lives today. In Letter 10, the patient has made some new friends. But Lewis isn't simply asking whether they're good friends or bad friends. He seems interested in something subtler. What happens when our desire to belong begins to change the person we present to other people? So our question this week is, how much of ourselves do we change to belong?
In my head, I was trying to remember the last letter of starting to find pleasure in other ways and whether it was a distraction or not. You were very upbeat when you were narrating it, so I got a bit surprised when it started playing.
Oh, really?
Sounded like Screwtape was very pleased with the news that he got. And so in this one, the patient's finding a new circle of people to be around and he's cheering himself up that way. So as well as the church folk he already knows from going to church on the Sunday, assuming he's still doing that, then there's all these sophisticated folk who don't go to church and they have completely different perspective.
We like to feel ourselves part of a group, and not being part of a group creates anxiety. What the patient is doing in this is signalling, I'm one of you.
Or he's trying to signal that he's one.
Yeah. And that's where the trap lies. Why do you think that desire to belong has such power over us?
When you're different and you stand out, that's pretty lonely. I still feel that I do adapt and I do change my behaviour slightly in different social settings. It sometimes feels like pretending, like make-believe, fake it till you make it type thing. Read the room, you try and kind of figure out what is appropriate and then you try to mimic it. So you're trying to take your cues from outside.
Perhaps that's where Lewis makes this particular letter uncomfortable, because most of us probably do behave slightly differently depending on who we're with. I had an innate desire to please other people, and it was very difficult for me as a people pleaser to learn to trust my own opinions and impressions as being valid and relevant and permissible.
Whether you want somebody to like you or you want to fit into a new group or not, there is a certain degree of adaptation. I get that.
Yeah, and that seems to be natural. There's a certain amount of mirroring that you do as a form of showing desire to be accepted, because that seems to me to be at the core of having good manners and being receptive to other people.
Yeah, but at what point do you stop being yourself? Is it like dipping your toe into a pool and kind of just testing the water and kind of seeing what it's like? Or is this about fully changing who you are? When people start to do that, it's very easy to get lost.
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily what we say, but what we laugh at, what we stay silent about, and even the expression on our face. The attention in the letter to the tiny signals that we use with other people. Do you recognise that as something you might have done in the past?
The truth is that I don't put myself in those situations very often. And I know that I don't do that. And I know that that also makes me unpopular. Laughing at something that we don't actually find funny. I find that quite a lot because I can be quite literal. Sit there and go, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You're
one of those.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I've been in environments where maybe somebody else would say, oh, I just laughed along, I didn't quite get it. Or afterwards, somebody I know quite well might say, well, I didn't feel like saying anything because I just didn't know what the reaction would be if I said something different.
And I think everybody's the same in that respect, that you get in with a group of people that you feel comfortable with, so you may not necessarily have to do that. But when you're in a circumstance with people that you don't know, there's a desire to fit in. So changing some of your own behaviour sort of fits the bill, more like social survival.
What I find difficult today is this idea of being so pliable. There are times that individuals might not really have a sense of self because they're constantly looking outside of themselves. So the mirror becomes the way of seeing themselves. It's almost like, I don't know who I am, so I'm going to go and see what those people are like. in a way, being a chameleon can be incredibly awesome because you could potentially fit into loads and loads of groups. It's the thought behind it, it's the intention behind it. If you don't have a strong sense of who you are, then isn't that what groupthink is? Isn't that what echo chambers are? Isn't all of that connected where if you lose your own centre, and I suppose this is the whole point of the book, isn't it?
Or you never develop it in the first place.
Or you never develop it in the first place. How can you, for yourself, judge what your red line is, the thing that you won't cross, what your moral compass is, what you believe, what makes you laugh?
Anything can become a habit. Doing something repeatedly can become habitual.
Yeah.
And if you're repeatedly saying the things that you want other people to hear because you think that they will like it, then you're second guessing them and you're not being true to yourself. I suppose the opposite of that would be practicing being yourself, practicing being generous yourself, practicing doing the things which shape you individually, trying to be a good person, an honest person, following the virtues but not necessarily hugely outspoken.
I don't think that Lewis is warning us against pretending as such. I think what he's saying is whatever you do again and again and again, that's the thing that matters.
Yes, and I think that he's also pointing to the need to develop discernment. And discernment quite often comes through experience. It's not something that you can necessarily read about. I suppose you need to understand what it is that you're looking at. So whilst it's comfortable to react positively to other people in social situations, at the same time, you also need to employ your own discernment and be yourself and state your own opinions, but dance the dance and walk the walk and be personable with it, but also be true to yourself. In the letter, Lewis takes the idea farther. The patient begins living almost two parallel lives. What did you make of that?
Oh yeah, like when he was talking about, okay, he still goes to church and he kneels with the grocer, but then he goes to this party and he wouldn't talk about one group to the other because they wouldn't necessarily understand and get on, and maybe being a bit smug.
Yeah.
About like he gets both, whereas the others wouldn't necessarily get each other. That's how I read it. Like, that's how I heard it.
No, that's the intention. I feel that with the grocer, he says that the grocer wouldn't understand the witty urbane life that he had at the weekend, and the witty urbane people wouldn't understand the spiritual side of him that he has with his church going and with the grocer. The point that Screwtape is making there is that with encouragement, somebody can be dishonest to both parties continuously, whilst feeling an undercurrent of self-satisfaction, and the self-satisfaction in one's deception of other people. In appearing to be something to other people that you're not, you're practicing a form of deception. It's spiritual pride.
So maybe in the letter, it doesn't start out as dishonesty. The point is that on a surface level, on a conscious level, the patient is just doing what they're doing. There is no extreme. There is no good or evil. There is this kind of grey area, and that's where the battle is. And this grey area is about a person who doesn't know themselves. It's really interesting that you chose this book at all and these letters, because there is an example here around neurodivergence. So literally, a person doesn't know how to be with one type of group and therefore has to look outside of themselves for those social cues, and doesn't necessarily know how they are being received. We are all thinking that we are being authentic, and then there is a disconnect, because the moment we are authentic, then on the other side there is a sudden like, oh, I don't get it, and a certain degree of recoiling. And so that's why it can become exhausting to try and read a room wherever one goes with groups of people until one finds one's own community, tribe or whatever. Because in some situations, there's almost like a need to kind of hold a part of yourself back, to compartmentalise, and like this bit cannot come out because if it does, it won't be accepted, it won't be well received.
Or you fear that you would be excluded.
What this letter was starting to allude to was before there are words and opinions, there are behaviours. When I'm laughing at something or agreeing with somebody, How often am I doing that because everybody else is doing that? All I can do is trust that I am being true to myself, but I'm not being blind to myself.
Having more than one persona or multiple different personas with multiple different groups is exhausting. I like being myself. I'm old enough that it doesn't really matter to me anymore what people think about me. I'm very glad about that. It's a relief.
Yeah, so I suppose we shouldn't have to pretend. If we agree with something, great. If we don't agree with it, there are options. There are times to speak up. There are times that you may not agree, but it might not be worth your energy in saying anything. I think what people find it very difficult to do is understand the difference between speaking up when it's necessary to speak up and letting things be when we don't necessarily agree. I didn't intend to rhyme at the end.
It's very good.
The healthiest friendships are exactly those where we don't have to agree.
Yes, we do.
I'm just pretending to laugh at that joke.
Thank you for joining us for another After the Letter conversation. If you haven't yet heard Letter 10 itself, you'll find it in our main playlist. Next week, we'll continue with Letter 11, where these new friendships lead Lewis into a fascinating exploration of laughter, humour, and what happens when almost everything becomes a joke. Until then, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever noticed yourself becoming a slightly different person simply because you wanted to belong? Or perhaps, what makes a friendship somewhere you can genuinely be yourself? As always, please keep the conversation thoughtful and respectful. Thank you for listening.